Let's talk about Hitler.
That'll make sense later.
I'm immaculately conceived.
I don't know what to do.
I swear I'm not stupid.
Take it or leave it. Sometimes you just want to leave it.
If I gotta borrow my mom's underwear, I'm borrowing her underwear.
You just, yeah.
Misa likes the Jar Jar Binks.
I'm not gonna edit it out.
Oh no.
I don't know. Like I think I'm just pretty great. Just staying on the
Sucks to
planet.
suck.
Why are you saying it with a question mark?
Clap, bitch.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Action.
And we're live. I'm Anna.
And I'm Jessica.
And this is Why Are You Yelling? We are back for round 2 of the Formula One 2025 season. We're going to give you our kind of notes, a little recap, a little review. We were in China this week. We were not in China.
We were not.
We
watched it. I stood up.
We were on China. We were on China's time zone.
Yeah,
or at least you were.
I was, and it was not great. I will never do it again. I'll just watch it in the morning. Never again in my life.
Yeah.
That was actually, because I literally kept thinking, like, did I do this last year? I don't think so. I think I watched it later. I watched the sprint live because that was like at 11
p.m.
Yeah, our time. And so that was rough.
But the actual sprint, was it the sprint race?
The sprint race was at 11 p.m.
Yeah. So then the qualifying for the regular race and then the actual race were both at 3 a.m. One was 3 a.m. It would technically have been Saturday morning.
Mm-hmm.
And the other was 3 a.m. Sunday morning.
Yeah, it was really horrible.
And you stayed up. Did you stay up for both?
For both.
Oh, bless.
And
I'm not.
I'm dead. I'm literally just like, and then I just woke up to horrible. It was just not great. It was just not a great night.
Yeah. So we were, for round 2, it's called, officially, the name is the Heineken Chinese Grand Prix. The track is the Shanghai International Circuit. And just a quick note about the track. I really like this track.
Yeah.
I like the layout a lot. It's very, it's unique.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that any other tracks have some of these similar features. Like specifically the start is this, I think they say it's the longest turn or longest corner on the calendar for F1.
Yeah, it's like,
it's
really,
not like it's almost
crazy.
like a spiral kind of vibe. It's like it just keeps going.
It's like a literal half circle.
Uh-huh.
It's crazy.
And then they have it's either the longest or one of the longest.
It's one of the longest
straights where it's just like you're flat out.
No, it was fun.
Yeah, we mentioned sort of in the last episode that we remember last year's race in China and that like seeing like these shots down the straight, you've got like one car comes flying by and then like 20 seconds back is the next car. And it's just like this never ending shot of them coming.
That shot was like really cool because it's just like you're watching these things like attack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just hop right into summarizing pretty much how the weekend went. It was a sprint weekend. So it was the first sprint weekend of the calendar. So our sprint race results were Lewis Hamilton got his first win with Ferrari.
Hey.
And that was awesome. And then Oscar Piastri and Max Verstappen. And for the main race, our winner was Oscar Piastri.
Let's go.
Lando Norris was second, and then George Russell was third, which I think is exactly how qualifying went as well. Pretty sure that's exactly, it was the exact same. Because when I was looking at the press conferences, I was like, oh, look, it's like the exact same thing.
No, it was Russell split the
he split
two
so he split them last time. Okay, so
but still, your top 3 were the same in a slightly different order.
So that leaves Lando Norris is still leading the championship, followed by Max Verstappen, George Russell, Oscar Piastri. Kimi Antonelli has 22 points, so he's currently 5th. He is a rookie that has like pretty much gotten points every race, I think. So I mean, we had 2, but
did he score points in the sprint? Let's see.
He got 2 points.
Okay, Kimmy, I see you.
So he is definitely our most successful rookie as of right now. So that being said, for the team standings, so McLaren is still leading. Then it's Mercedes, Red Bull, Williams, Ferrari, Haas, Aston Martin, Sauber, Racing Bulls, and Alpine is last with no points. So it was a rough weekend. I mean, it wasn't even that it was rough. It was honestly more crazy, like, after the race and, like, waking up to going, what the fuck? I went to bed. This is what happened. I woke up, and now it's different.
Yeah, so to give y'all some context, so she watched, as we said, watched the race live 3 a.m. this morning. We're recording. The race literally happened this morning. I woke up around 9 a.m. and just did a replay because I was not about to stay up and put myself through that. watching it live. So basically, I watched the race and then immediately started getting ready for us to come film. So I only watched the race and then the press conference that happened immediately after and the post-race show. I have not listened to any other podcasts. I have not gotten on social media because I didn't want them to spoil for me who won the race. I haven't looked at any news, nothing. So we get in here, start prepping for the show. And then she's like, well, the thing that happened with Ferrari. And I'm like,
she said, what? And I was like, what do you mean? I just assumed she saw already.
What happened with Ferrari? What do you mean? And she said, oh, well, let me tell you.
Yeah. We'll get into Ferrari. Yeah. But you have some fun facts for us.
I sure do. I love my fun stats and facts and numbers. So here's some fun statistical facts from the race in Shanghai. So McLaren scored their 50th 1-2 finish in constructor history. The first was at the 1968 Canadian Grand Prix, where Denny Hulme beat Bruce McLaren. Oh, the actual the namesake of the team. Okay. Oscar Piastri's win was his third Grand Prix victory in his career. And he was, again, I listened to the interviews after, and he said that compared to his first two wins, this one wasn't as emotional as the first two, but he said that it felt more satisfying because it was more of like a complete weekend. He did get his first career pole position in qualifying for this race, and then was able to convert that pole successfully into a victory. Yeah. And so he scored points for a 28th consecutive race weekend, which is the longest active streak in F1. And if I remember right, I'd have to double check on this. I know for a while last year, he had the longest active, basically starting and finishing a race streak.
I remember
where
that, yeah.
he had started and finished every single race and no other driver had. And he had never DNF'd, I don't think, last year.
Not that I remember, no.
And so that must still be active. Because he could have easily DNF'd last week in Australia.
He said no.
And he said, not today, Satan.
That's still one of my favorite moments ever.
I am a Ferrari girly. I do support Ferrari. I love Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. I think they're great. They're fabulous. But Oscar Piastri is quickly becoming
I love Oscar.
He's in my top 3 favorite drivers easily. Anytime he does well, I'm happy for him.
Yeah.
I think he's great. I love his cool as a cucumber sort of personality that when he does let other emotions sort of slip through, I think it's great.
Well, it was funny because he's like, I just screamed in my helmet. Nobody heard it. And so then Alex Jakes is like, well, we won't hear that, but we hear it happened.
Yeah. That was when he qualified for pole, was it?
Yeah, I think so.
I think, yeah. They told me qualified for pole, and he won't push the button to let you hear the whoop or the scream or the yell or whatever.
He goes, but I'm letting you know that it did happen.
Yeah. So back onto our statistical facts. Lando Norris finished second in Shanghai for the second consecutive season. And I feel like if I'm a driver, I'm just like, God dang it, I want to win it. To come so close to winning it 2 years in a row, you're like, I want to win at this track. I got beef with this track now.
Yeah. I mean, Lando probably feels a little bit better about it than last year because it was pretty much out of his control, especially towards the end, because he was promised to be able to attack Oscar, but then he wasn't able to because of the break. So he pretty much kind of just had to survive and wasn't able to. So, which is at least better. It's better to know, I wasn't able to attack because of this mechanical failure versus, because I am trash. So that might feel a little bit better. But, yeah, it would be definitely
And I think it's interesting, too. I like that McLaren, they've been saying our drivers are free to race each other, but they're being a little more strategic to try to minimize the damage if they were to race too close and something bad ended up happening. I think it's interesting, and I do applaud them for trying to manage the situation better than last year with having two drivers that are, both up there in the standings, in the points, and that are very good drivers. I think that it's a good thing that they were strategic about saying, we're going to let Lando, don't worry, we're going to let you fight Oscar for the win, basically. Race hard but fair. But we gotta build up the lead to the car in third place so we don't risk being under attack and losing the 1-2.
Yeah.
But we're going to time when we allow that to happen. And I imagine if it had gotten to a point where like it was very like if Lando kept attacking and it kept not working, I imagine there would be a point where McLaren would kind of be like, okay, like you had your, 10 laps or whatever it is to try and attack and you couldn't do it. So now we got to like chill.
Yeah.
I'm assuming. I imagine that would make sense to me. But
yeah.
Okay, moving on. Lando Norris now leads the Drivers' Championship by 8 points over Red Bull's Max Verstappen. With P3, George Russell scored a Mercedes' 300th podium finish as an F1 constructor. He also scored podium finishes in consecutive races for the first time since 2022. Verstappen's late pass on the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc to clinch P4 meant he preserved second in the Drivers' Championship over Russell. So Esteban Ocon driving for Haas. So last week in Australia, he was the slowest qualifier. And this week in Shanghai, Haas really turned it around. And Esteban Ocon finished P5 after all was said and done after
drama.
The race. But that's the Haas's best ever result at this track.
Yeah, I think him and Ollie both were in the points.
Yeah, they even without all the things happening after the race finished, which we will get to. We probably won't keep teasing it. Even after all that, before that happened, Haas both drivers had finished in the points. We already mentioned, but Kimi Antonelli driving for Mercedes took P6 and has scored in both his Grand Prix starts so far. And he is one of two teenagers. So him and also Ollie Behrman scored in the same Grand Prix for only the second. So two teenagers scored in the same Grand Prix for only the second time ever. The first time it happened was in 2017 with Max Verstappen and Lance Stroll in Monza. But that's also like, this is the youngest, I believe, the grid has maybe ever been in terms of like how many of the drivers are very, very young. Alex Albon, driving for Williams, led the race on his birthday. Happy birthday to Alex. Turned 29. So he becomes the 9th driver to do this, to lead the race on his birthday. He finished in P7. So he officially led the race. It wasn't just like a lapping scenario or whatever. So him leading the Grand Prix was the first official laps that Williams had led in a Grand Prix for nearly 10 years. The last being for Felipe Massa and Valtteri Bottas at Silverstone in 2015. So 10 years. Yeah.
That's crazy.
We already mentioned that Haas scored double points. And we'll mention more about our rookies in our rookie report later on in the episode. Rookie, is it Gabriel Bortoleto finished P14, beating teammate Nico Hülkenberg by 9.4 seconds, which, surprising how Nico did, like, I feel like pretty well in Australia. Like, I think he was one of my, like, highlights in terms of drivers and surprisingly did very well. Yeah. And then this weekend, it was just not great.
No.
My last fun fact is not really that fun. Fernando Alonso, driving for Aston Martin, retired in, like, was it the opening lap of the race?
I think so. It was very early on.
He's the only driver without a finish to a race so far this season.
Yeah.
And that is the end of our fun facts.
Yeah, he finished the sprint race, but yeah, he's not finished a main race yet. Yeah. And he had it was his brake. So it just went out and it was just done.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest storylines that everybody's probably currently talking about after the race is Ferrari, because they were both disqualified. Both Charles and Lewis were disqualified from the race, originally finishing, I believe you said 5th and 6th. So Charles ended up being disqualified because he ended up doing a one-stop strategy and he was underweight. So it's kind of like a callback to what happened to George Russell in Spa, where he was just slightly underweight, and they even replaced the wing on the car because it was damaged, which
they replaced Charles's
wing. So it was a replacement wing. So during it was like one of the first few laps of the race.
Charles, it was on lap 1.
Yeah, Charles and Lewis. Charles kind of just bumped Lewis a little bit. He jumped over a curb, and it wasn't really anybody's fault. And so the his left front wing, that little piece, was just gone. So it actually helped him a lot. It actually ended up being, like, it helped a lot with downforce. It really ended up aiding him.
Yeah, it basically, once that piece was gone, the piece that sits kind of like an L, this part was gone.
Yeah.
So the other part that was left hanging, it hung down lower. And so they were saying that it could be creating a greater grounding effect, and basically helping make up for the difference.
But also when he hit the brake, it goes up. So it was really like an extreme flexi wing. And so, but when they reweighed him, they did include that. And I mean, he just ended up being underweight. Lewis, on the other hand, what happened to him was, so there's a skid block underneath of the floor of the car. So it's on the floor of the car, underneath of the car.
Basically like a wooden plank that's like screwed into the bottom of all the cars. So, it's the same on every car.
Yeah, the same on every car. And the FIA has, like, it has to be a certain thickness. And so
that basically ensures that that the cars are not, like, they have a minimum height requirement that, like, or basically a maximum height requirement. They have to be within, like, they can't be lower, like, closer to the ground other than a certain amount. I don't know what the amount is, but well,
you can, but then you're just going to wear it out.
Yeah. So basically that helps to enforce and ensure that rule. And that's how they monitor it, that you're not getting too close to the ground.
Yeah. So they call it a skid plate. It's like you said, it's designed to wear away when the floor strikes against the bumps on the track and curbs, which is pretty normal, but it's just how they had Lewis's car set up. They just had the calculation slightly wrong, so it ended up degrading more. Like, just it was like barely off.
It was 0.5 millimeters.
Yeah. So, and yeah, it's a measure the FIA has to ensure that cars are not running too low in pursuit of aerodynamics. And
look at me knowing what I'm talking about.
It was found below the 9 millimeter permitted by the regulations. And because, if it is too worn, it can improve performance as the cars can run closer to the track, increasing the ground effect and the downforce. So that's why Lewis was disqualified. Pierre Gasly was also disqualified, and it was for being underweight as well. So I would just assume it's one of those things where, because of the track being resurfaced, especially in Charles's position, you just underestimated the tire degradation on it. And so, but I think if I read correctly, it is like the first time that's ever happened where both teammates were disqualified
from a single team.
From the single team. So it was just not, like, Ferrari great in the sprint. Lewis did great in the sprint. Charles struggled a lot this weekend, which he'd even said that it was not really, he was just struggling to find the setup. He was struggling on the track. In one of his interviews, he's like, I can't even necessarily blame the car because Lewis is doing great and I'm just not, and I have to figure it out. And so,
I mean, I think he did figure it out by the time they got to the main race, though, because at one point he was behind Lewis and the team gave the order for them to swap places because Charles's pace was faster than Lewis's.
Yeah. Which it's interesting to know what that would have been if that damage to his car wouldn't have happened, because it truly does get, like, I mean, if you were to watch the wing, because that's what DC was talking about too, David Coulthard, about how it's probably just aiding him really all the way around, just because it's like an extreme flexi wing now. And so that was another thing with Ferrari, is it was interesting to hear team orders. And I recoiled into my body when Lewis said, "I'll tell you when we're going to swap." But I also when I was watching it, it was because he was so close to the people in front. He's like, we need to pass them. And, like, if we're going to swap, it needs to be like a clean spot.
You need to do it strategically. I mean, I think everyone knows that, but the people on the pit wall maybe aren't necessarily the best at judging when that would be.
Yeah.
But sometimes drivers can be of the opinion very vocally that it's not safe to do it. The lead driver that's being told to give the position to their teammate, they can be a little obstinate sometimes. So not saying that's what Lewis was doing
I don't think Lewis Hamilton liked being told to swap positions.
Oh, I don't think so either.
I don't think anybody does.
No, you're kind of, I understand being the lead driver in that scenario. And you're like, well, if they can pass me, they need to pass me. Like, I'm not going to give it to them. If they can do it, then do it, prove it, right? So I get that, but also as a team, you don't want both your drivers sort of fighting and risking damage, especially when it's clear one has more pace than the other. But yeah, I think that they even mentioned on the F1 TV broadcast, they're like, it's amazing how whenever team orders come out, that sometimes suddenly the lead driver has radio problems and can't hear their engineers speaking to them. Or they suddenly can't communicate back. And it's, amazing how that happens. It's like,
Well, and they talked to Charles about it afterwards too. And he was basically like, I don't think looking back and seeing everything, like everybody knew I had front wing damage. It's kind of like, are you sure? And then, when it got to a place, like we swapped, it ended up being whatever. But Charles cracks me up on that radio though. He's like, and I'm like, he's just so sassy. But yeah, it just ended up not being Ferrari's weekend, which was a huge letdown because of the sprint. Like, it was such a, I was very excited about that. And then it just was not great.
Something I found interesting was that Charles, in one of his post-race interviews, they mentioned him being, I think it was with F1 TV, they mentioned to him being a little like sassy on the radio. And they're like, we love it. And he's like, yeah, he's like, being on an Italian team, Italians love to talk.
Yeah, he's like, they love to talk.
And his race engineer is Italian. And so he's like, we love to talk maybe a little bit too much. But he's like, it's one of those things where I basically just tell them to give me all the information and basically keep talking to me until I get frustrated with them and then tell them to leave me alone and to stop.
Which, when you have that relationship, it's really, the only thing that matters is if you both are on the same page, it's fine. Doesn't really matter. All of us going, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Which I just think it's interesting how different drivers want different things from their engineers. Because you can compare that directly to Lewis Hamilton. He was talking about I don't remember if he made comments about it, but basically from the Australian Grand Prix, he basically got on the radio multiple times and told his engineer, too much information. I don't care. Like, I don't need to know. Like, I don't think he was being rude.
No.
But basically just being like, leave me alone so I can drive. And he at one point said, basically, don't give me information unless I ask you for it.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting in how different, Lewis and Charles are seemingly with what they're wanting and needing from their engineers.
Yeah, I think too, Lewis in Australia, they were in the rain, so it's kind of like, please don't distract me. I'm literally trying to survive. It's the same way
when you're driving your own personal car, and if traffic gets really busy and the road gets congested, if there's construction,
I can't see if if everything's too loud.
If it starts to rain, you got to turn the music down and everybody in the car stop talking and let me focus. Yeah, it's the same
nobody
thing.
Speak, like my ears are connected to my eyes.
Yes. I can't stop talking. I can't see.
Exactly. So essentially, yes. One thing that I thought was interesting with Lewis was, so this weekend, like we said, he qualified, he got pole for the sprint, and then he ended up winning the sprint. And when he was asked about like how he approached this weekend versus last weekend, as he had said last weekend, he pretty much went in there seeing how they do things and maybe I can learn something and let me check out this operation. Quickly realized, oh, hell nah. And then came into this weekend and was like, I have a list of demands. I need these to be met. And when they were, look at where he was. So, yeah.
And I think that's fair enough. That's how you kind of have to handle it. It's a situation of like, you don't know how this team operates, what the environment is like on a race day, how because everyone behaves differently in like practice or in a team meeting versus when you're in a actual race time scenario.
Yeah.
So you don't know until you know and have experienced it. So, I think it's fair enough. You got to take the first race weekend. It's like a test drive. It's like, and then you go into it expecting there to be a lot of bumps in the road.
Yeah.
And then you come back and say like, fair enough. This is all the stuff I want to change and how we can better make this, make it so that I'm set up for success as a driver.
Yeah. And I think too, Lewis having 13 years experience with Mercedes and how that team operates, and they were a very successful team, is like what he can then bring to Ferrari into how they operate. And hey, well, this is how we did it at Mercedes. And can we incorporate that into here? That's information they otherwise might not really be able to get. And so it is valuable to even maybe help their own operations or figure out like what is and what isn't going to work and what you can change to adapt. So I thought that was very interesting. Very disappointed in Ferrari. Very disappointed. I guess I could say in them in the sense of like
in our drivers.
Not
our
in our
drivers did great.
No, yeah, the drivers, completely.
But you know what? It's par for the course being a Ferrari fan because our drivers we love and support. Our team makes us look like clowns.
But see, that's really hard for Lewis Hamilton fans because he's not a he's not a clown. Not that Charles is a clown, but I'm
Get
saying
that
he's
big red nose out, baby.
Yeah, I know, but he's, Charles has been like, fuck, like shit. Like we know, and we know one day it's gonna work itself out. But with Lewis, we're like, fix it now. This is unacceptable. So, yeah, that is one of the biggest stories. And you had some things with RB you wanted to talk about.
Yes, I did.
Racing Bulls.
Okay, so a good point that one of the F1 TV commentators brought up in the post-race show, or they posed the question, is the RB car, the Racing Bulls car, better as a car than the actual Red Bull? And the reason they pose this question is because you look at the history for Red Bull, people want to say that car was developed around Max. It suits his driving style, blah, 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 blah. But when you see how many second drivers for that team have struggled so hard to drive that car and to get, to not even getting near the same results Max consistently gets out of that car.
Except in 2023, because Checo seemed to do pretty well. He was second.
He did okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he was probably one of the most successful
in terms
number
of keeping
two
up.
of keeping up, for a while.
Yeah, and then so they pose the question overall, like if only one driver can drive the car, is the car good, or is that one driver just that much better? When you look at how the RB car, you look at their two drivers, they're consistently, at least so far this season, those two drivers are pretty close to each other, in qualifying, in finishing position. There's not a huge, to me, disparity between them. Obviously, Isaac Hadjar had that unfortunate formation lap issue last weekend where he didn't even get to start the race. But other than, that one thing aside, if you look at qualifying, Hadjar has been one of the better qualifiers of the rookies. And even Yuki, I think Yuki's been let down a little by the strategy of the team.
Yes.
But his qualifying and starting position and how he does during the first, half of a race has been really good and impressive. So that's the question that they posed is the RB car, when you can have two drivers who can actually drive it and operate it, is it better than the Red Bull car in terms of just developmentally? Are they developing a better car?
I don't know. So in Drive to Survive, there was a very interesting clip that shows when Liam went to go test a Red Bull, Max came out very casually, set his lap. So I don't know how many he set, but he set some so they could just,
have a reference
point for Liam. Liam was not far off of him in a past Red Bull, which would have been developed for Max. So that being said, it really, as much as I know there's so many, the discourse online about Liam is okay, so why are you here? Pretty negative discourse around him. That being said, from my understanding, and he didn't get that much testing in Bahrain, there's been a lot of issues with his car, mechanically, that have been kind of out of his control. Then he goes, you can't really say Australia was a fair way to test his skill. Then I think he had car issues again in FP1 in Shanghai. So it's I don't know how much time in the car he has gotten. And one of the things, which goes back to actually something Lando said, this was a very front end track. And Lando is a driver who struggles not having a rear end. And so that's why one of the things they were struggling with before the main race is figuring out that balance. And so Max is he's an attacker. He's a front end guy. I don't know what Liam's driving style is. So I don't know that he's been able to dial in that Red Bull as of right now to what that's going to be good for him. So I don't know if it's a sense of I feel if the Red Bull is dialed into that driver, it's the better car. But if we're talking Max had actually said as well, he does think if you put Liam back in that Racing Bull car, the RB, he would be faster than he is in this Red Bull car. And so so Max is even aware of that. And it wasn't a negative thing he was saying about Liam. He was just being honest about how difficult that car is to drive. So
imagine if the car, okay, is the car difficult to drive in general? Or is it just difficult to drive if you're not Max?
Yes.
Because I started to say, imagine if Max was in a car that was easier to drive.
Yeah, look at his championships. look at him at the start of last year, and then when things started to get difficult, I mean, that's really a testament to like how great Max is as a driver. And, everybody kind of just expects to see him at the front now. So it's like, oh, well, whatever. But he's not really getting the credit of the fact that like, no, this car it's not the same car he had when he was like winning every single race. Mm-hmm. So it's just, I would say maybe it's the more, I could see where it's like, yeah, maybe the Racing Bull is the better developed car. Maybe it's the more rounded car. I think if you put the right person in the Red Bull car and they can maximize it the way Max is, it's the better car. Yeah. It's the faster car. Mm-hmm. But the margin of error is so thin on the Red Bull that it's literally you're going to be at the top or the bottom. Where in the RB, there's like room to fluctuate and probably grow and find it more
room for mistakes and errors.
And they're more forgiving. I think you have way less for like if you fuck up in the Red Bull, like you're fucked.
Yeah, and then I think that then it begs the question. It still begs the question because when you look at like constructor standings, the constructors, championship is designed to reward the manufacturer who builds, the best car, because ideally, if you have the best car, both of your drivers should be consistently scoring points and scoring high points. Mm-hmm. So it still begs the question of like, well, if only one of your drivers is capable of scoring points in this car consistently, like you said, you literally have Max who's in the top or near the top, and then Liam is at the bottom, either qualifying last or finishing out of the points.
He's had not a great start at all.
Yeah.
And I did notice David Coulthard was saying like watching Liam in the Red Bull, like he's not pushing it the way Max is. So like he's not pushing it to the limit. He's not being as aggressive with it. And when we're talking about tenths of seconds, that matters.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that's like, I don't know why he wasn't pushing. I don't know, like...
I know he
was scared, too, if it was a discussion he had with the team.
Well, in Australia, when, during those practice sessions, if I remember right, he had a couple of spin outs, a couple of wobbles, a couple of moments where it was like... He found the limit and pushed further than what it was.
But yeah, because we were saying, I mean, he didn't perform well, really, in the dry or the wet.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if it's a case of like, he attacked during those practice sessions in Australia. He crossed the limit of what he was able to do with that car. And then maybe he pulled back too much in this round because it's like, better to be slow and on track than fast and in the wall. But Red Bull, to me, strikes me as the kind of team that would rather you be on the limit and throw it into the wall, pursuing that limit versus being afraid to attack.
I feel like Red Bull is mad at you no matter what, to be honest. I feel
if
like
you're not Max.
Yeah, if you're not in the points, they're pissed. And to be honest, it is what it is. But I think they've created a scenario for themselves as having this really toxic work environment situation where like now you have a driver who's been waiting for this chance forever. Arguably he should have been in Formula One. He should have been in the RB. Yuki should be in that Red Bull. But
don't you dare put Yuki in that Red Bull now. Everyone was like, Yuki in the Red Bull. I'm like, no, that seat is cursed. Don't you dare
Yuki
put him.
Wants it. And Yuki's an aggressive driver. He might suit him. He tested the Red Bull during Bahrain.
That seat is cursed now. And I'm like, don't you dare touch a hair on Yuki's precious head.
But now you have Liam, who he got the Red Bull seat. And it's not like he doesn't know how this team operates. He's been in the background watching it.
He's been chomping at the bit to get that seat. He's been very aggressively pursuing it. And he's got his chance now, and it's like, okay, what are you going to do with it? Show us what you got. And it just has.
But what sucks, Red Bull does not have. For a team who has a development team, they're not nice to developing their drivers. They are not good at developing talent. They expect it up front, and if you don't have it, get the fuck out of here. And that's not true. Really what it's about. Like, if you're developing people, they have to be allowed to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So maybe you should have put the driver you've developed for 4 or 5 years in the Red Bull and then developed Liam more. That makes more sense to me.
I mean, look at Yuki. He's the prime example of, and I don't know that he was necessarily Red Bull's pick to be in that sister team. He was brought in more as a favor to Honda, who has supported Yuki through his whole career. And so I don't know that Yuki was necessarily their pick, but as long as Red Bull had that relationship with Honda as their engine manufacturer, then Yuki had that seat. And so he's been allowed to develop over the past, 4 or 5 years. And you look at where he started as a driver, and he was spinning off all the time. Going off track into the wall, like all this stuff, right?
He was always yelling at his engineer, was known as a hothead. He's developed, he's matured.
But he's been allowed to do that. He's been allowed, like you said, to make the mistakes. But again, it comes back to if Honda wasn't attached to him being in that seat, I don't know that Red Bull would have given him the time. But look at him now. He's a much better driver. He's consistently, he's a good, reliable driver now, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, normally if something happens with Yuki, somebody probably messed him up or the strategy was wrong. It's not, I don't think Yuki makes that many mistakes that were his fault. I mean, and if he does, it's not throwing it in the wall typically. Or if it's a racing incident type thing.
Yeah, I think he is a reliable driver, similar to, I think, Nico Hülkenberg. Or even Kevin Magnussen last season, where it's if you give them a good enough car, if you give them an okay strategy, they're going to place in the points and they're going to do well. And you can rely on them to not throw it in the wall.
But see, that goes back to why everybody wanting a rookie to they wanted them to be Max. Every team now, Max is the benchmark, and I'm going to find my talent, which, by the way, Max didn't just get thrown in the Red Bull. He was an AlphaTauri driver at first, and he developed some before in which obviously he was already naturally gifted. I would argue probably how Antonelli is going to be, but it's not the norm. And so now you just have everybody kind of in a way.
They want to try to replicate the success that Red Bull's had with Max, and I'm I don't know that it's that easy to do that.
And I guess what I don't understand is why people think that's the way. When your most successful driver in history, Lewis Hamilton, that's not what his story was. So to have such success as a team doesn't mean you have to have this young kid bring it to you. And so it's just this weird mindset that I'm why is this this is how, it has to be this. I have to have this rookie, and then we're going to do this and that and the third. And it's it's just a really weird mindset when you clearly can have an experienced driver bring you plenty of success. So I don't know, but that is an interesting question. But I mean, I think Max, saying that he thinks Liam would be faster in the Racing Bull pretty much is kind of its own little acknowledgement to how difficult the Red Bull car is. So we'll see how Japan goes. Maybe it'll be better. It's also another high-speed track, but we'll talk about Japan in a little bit. So Lando kind of had a tough weekend at the start because, he had said, he really likes to have some back end of the car, and this track was kind of difficult because it didn't really have that, so they were trying to find that balance for him. He didn't do that well in the sprint. And so during qualifying, Lando ended up kind of messing up his lap and ended up just pitting on the very last lap. So, the argument is, if he would have finished and not made the mistake, he would have been on pole. But the fact is he made the mistake. That's why he didn't get pole. So it's kind of the whole what if, what did Max say? If my mom was my dad, she'd have balls.
If my mom had balls, she'd be my dad. If my mom
had balls, she'd be my dad. So it's basically okay, well, that's not
what happened.
That's not what happened. So why are we, let's not harp on it. So he kind of was struggling throughout the sprint, kind of found better pace in qualifying for the main race. And then, I think it would have been more of a McLaren battle if he didn't have the brake issue. So we had said earlier, Alonso had a brake issue. The brakes just went out. He had no brakes.
His brakes caught on fire at one point. So Gasly was right behind him, gets on his radio and is Alonso's brakes are on fire. Yeah. And so then immediately we then hear Alonso over the radio being my brakes are gone. And so on lap 1, they pulled him into the pits and yeah.
And so Lando's brakes, so essentially he was kind of promised he'd be able to fight with Oscar or race Oscar. And then the brakes just fell away. And so he wasn't really able to. And that's when his engineer's listen, it's better to finish this race how you are. Because if you go and attack, you're not gonna.
Yeah.
That's essentially what's going to happen.
So basically around 10 laps to the end of the race, I think Lando kind of started to notice the brake problem more. And so that's when it was brought to all of our attention that basically what was happening is that his car was still able to stop and to brake. But so when you press on your brake in your normal car, there's this,
it's spongy.
It's spongy. So there's a certain amount of distance you have where you can basically push it until it's in the floor and it stops, right? And so there is some resistance to your brakes, right? So if you were to try to push your brake pedal and it just like either didn't move or it went flat down and didn't do anything, or it gets a little like loose feeling, like there's not as much resistance, then your brakes are not behaving the way that they should be, and they're not moving the way that they should be. So basically what was happening is his car had the ability to brake. He was just having to, my understanding is he was just having to push on the brake more each time he wanted to stop, even if, so say you were wanting to stop the car 20%, by 20% of its speed, right? So you might push the brake in by 2 millimeters to push it to reduce your speed by 20%. It was getting to where they said he was losing about 0.5 millimeter of distance on having to push it. So basically, next lap he goes around, he's having to push it 2.5 millimeters to brake it 20%. And then the next lap after that, it's having to push it 3 millimeters. And so, and basically it gets to the point where like, if you only have, 10 millimeters from not pushing the brake to it being on the floor, then eventually you're going to have that thing pressed to the floor and it's only braking 20% when it should be fully stopped. So you kind of had this problem where his brakes were not being as sensitive and he's having to push them more than he would have liked. And so basically you can't then rely on your brakes to behave predictably, and that becomes dangerous because again, it gets to a certain point where they were like at a certain point you're going to be pushing all the way in the floor and your brakes aren't going to work. You're not going to be able to stop and like you could die. So and he said in post-race interviews that they asked him about it and they were like, kind of, when did you know and what was that like, and just talk us through that. And he said, well, I think the team knew about halfway through the race that I was going to have some brake issues, but they didn't know it was going to get as bad as quickly as it did. And so I think he was just they were keeping that from me, which rightfully so. Like sometimes your engineers, you don't need to know all the information. They need to be able to judge, unless you're specifically asking them for it, they need to judge sometimes when to give you critical information or not. But it got to a point where about 10 laps till the end was when it became very apparent. Yeah. And like you said, they had promised he was going to be able to attack Oscar a little closer to the end of the race. And he just unfortunately was not able to for like basically safety reasons and car operation reasons.
George got within a second of him. Like he wasn't under a second, but by the end he was like a second and a half, just right in that thing on the very last lap is how much time he ended. Like that's how slow like he had to be with the brakes and how it was very just
like 1.3 1.4 about a second and a half. And so and Lando dropped so far back from Piastri because he was staying within about 3 seconds of Piastri. And then Russell was about 2 to 3 seconds, maybe 4 seconds behind him. And then it got to where he ended up finishing almost 10 seconds after Oscar, because he said basically on the last lap, those last few corners, he was coasting to the finish. He couldn't use the brakes at all. And it like, that is so scary, especially because you can say, oh, well, just keep it flat out until you get to the finish line.
You gotta
stop. And then you just let off the gas and eventually you'll coast to a stop. But remember that on this track, the first turn, right after you cross the finish line, the first turn is that super long curve. It's a super long corner that you can't be going that fast when you're approaching it. And he couldn't stop. So it was just, that's very scary. He said that, I think him and Zach Brown both said that, maybe it got to a point where they said it went from being an issue to being critical. Yeah. Critical meaning somebody's going to get hurt or die. Yeah. And they said with about 2 laps to go, it was getting critical. And that if they had to go 1 or 2 laps more, like they would have had to call him in basically because it would have been too dangerous. Yeah.
No, that was,
that is wild.
That was crazy. Like my last driver that kind of stood out to me was Max. Because like in the race, he pretty much was just managing. It was a very quiet race from him for the most part. He was just chilling. And then he got like 15, 20-ish laps, right? About
to the end. Yeah.
And then he was like, let's go. And just was like, all right, time to push. And then you just saw the time and it was just going down and like he was getting close. I was like, that he has just been managing those tires, minding his business till he knew to attack. And so I thought it was just interesting because it's like, you really never know when somebody, especially because like Max is like kind of vocal. So I was like, when are we going to hear from him? And then he went on the hunt till like you kind of can. So Max to me was just somebody that stood out because it's like, once again, he's dealing with a car that clearly is not the best car, but he's pushing it and he manages tires. And then he finished, what did he finish in this race? Fourth. So like, and so, I mean, he ended up he went around Charles, did he pass then? Yeah, because it was 5th and 6th for them before they were disqualified.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so Max, I mean, ended up attacking both Ferraris, got around them, and then, was able to get, more points on the board because clearly he's the only one that can right now.
For his team.
So that was, he stood out to me in that sense because I'm just like, you can never, ever, ever count out Max, ever.
Yeah.
And you're like kind of silly if you ever try to because he's got to figure it out. So if it's something that could be figured out and managed, Max is going to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting that it kind of brings attention to you never quite know in certain scenarios how much pace a driver or a car truly has in certain parts of the race because they could be in tire management mode. Somebody brought up that point about the race in Australia. At one point, Oscar got on the radio. He was behind Lando. And he's basically like, you should let me get in front of, I have more pace in the car, swap positions. I can do more. And one of the broadcasters pointed out, they're like, yeah, it might seem like numbers wise you have more pace, but who's to say that Lando isn't just managing his tires right now. He could have a lot more pace in the car, but he's strategic about when to unleash that pace. And same thing for Max in this race where it's like, it might numbers wise and looks wise seem like they're not doing so great, but they're being strategic about when they need to push that much harder.
Yeah.
So it's all a balance.
It's all a balance. So yeah, Max was somebody who he stood out to me. So now we can hop into our rookie report. So I've had to amend our rookie report to include Liam Lawson. I did not think they were including him as a rookie. I found out that they were on F1 TV. So I have included him in our report. So now we have
6 rookies plus...
we have 6 plus 1?
Yeah. 6 and a bonus.
So our first rookie, Kimi Antonelli, sprint race, he finished 7th. So we got 2 points. In the main race, he finished 6th. He got 8 points. So he got 10 points. As we stated earlier, Kimi is the rookie that has scored in every race that he's been in in Formula One so far. He's definitely the most successful rookie as of yet. We're only 2 races in, but still pretty impressive. Isaac Hadjar, sprint race, 13th, no points. Main race, 11th, 0 points. So he scored no points, but he did well in qualifying. And he just, I think everybody was really suffering from the tire degradation. And so, being a new driver, trying to manage that, it kind of is what it is. Jack Doohan, sprint race, he was 20th, 0 points. Main race, 13th, 0 points. So Jack Doohan didn't really stand out to me this race, so I don't really have any notes. I can't really quite recall.
He's kind of anonymous to me.
Yeah. So far, for sure.
I haven't really noticed anything that he's done that's worth noticing. I kind of forget he's there, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like,
Nothing.
He's like a bowl of oatmeal right now. I'm just like, you could be something. You could be a little.
You gotta add some flavor in there.
Jazz it up a little.
You're plain oatmeal right now. You throw some brown sugar in there or some apples and so on.
Yeah.
So Ollie Behrman, sprint race 15th, 0 points. Main race 8th, 4 points. So this is his first time he's scored points, I think, because he didn't score points last weekend.
This year. Yes.
This year. So he is our second rookie. So Kimi Antonelli and Ollie Behrman are the only rookies that have scored points this season.
And as we mentioned in our fun facts, the second time in F1 history that 2 teenagers have scored points.
Yes.
In a race.
So
I will say, sorry, before you move on, Ollie had some funny radio moments himself.
He said ciao.
Yeah, he made a pass on, I think,
Liam Lawson.
Yeah, and said ciao on the radio as he made the pass, which was very funny. He did it again on someone else.
Yeah.
And then they mentioned it on the post show, and then he's like, I kind of feel bad about it now. Like,
yeah, Ocon thought it was hysterical.
He was like, what? No, I need the replay.
He goes, show it. And then they did. And he's like, that's hysterical.
He's like, I need the replay right now.
Yeah. So that was.
It's like iconic. I need that to be his catchphrase now. Because, you know, Max has his Simply Lovely. I'm like, I need ciao for Ollie.
The memes would be very good if that ends up being his catchphrase. Our next rookie, Gabriel Bortoleto, sprint race, 18th, 0 points. Main race, 14th, 0 points. I don't recall anything really nothing stood out to me this race. I mean,
he did spin out at the beginning of the race. He ended up in the gravel. And the only reason I noticed it really is because at one point I was looking at the map tracker for the race, and he was like way behind, like at
his
the
little
back.
dot was just
I know, it was like way
imagine
behind.
the little dots went where they were, like in like the gravel traps. How funny would that be?
That would be funny. But I was just like, what is this tractor doing on the track? And then they showed the replay of him spinning out, and I was like, okay, that makes more sense. Because I was like, how is Lawson, who started in the pit lane, so much further ahead?
Which, you know, something to note, Liam did end up 12th in the main race. So, I mean, he was almost there. So now we get to Liam Lawson, our next rookie. Sprint race, 14th, 0 points. Main race, 12th, 0 points. They started Liam out on the hard tire. So because there had been no data at that point collected on the hard tire. So they had done that. So also they knew how it was for Max.
Yeah.
But, you know, sometimes you just do that. They did that a lot last season with Checo, where it's like, all right, didn't go our way. Might as well collect some data for us for Max.
I mean, exactly. Why? I mean, if you know that if you're in this situation with Lawson qualifying last and starting in the pit lane, I mean, why not take the opposite strategy to Max and use that?
Yeah.
Why not?
No, it makes total sense.
Well.
So, I mean, something to be said, he did start dead last from the pit lane, and he ended up 12th. Maybe he'll surprise us. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt for a little bit. We'll see. I mean, obviously, he's talented or he wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. So it's very easy for all of us in our living room to have an opinion, but we'll see. Our last rookie, Fernando Alonso, sprint race, he finished 10th, right outside the points, 0 points for him. Main race, another DNF, as we said, so 0 points on the board. He has not finished a main race as of yet this season, and that was because of a brake failure, so really no fault of his own. And that is our rookie report. So who would you say your driver of the day is? I was very... something to note for Kimi Antonelli, he was driver of the day.
Voted, yeah.
Didn't really know why.
Yeah, he was surprised by that. Everyone who mentioned it was surprised.
George Russell was like, "What?" in the press, right? In the press conference.
Okay, good for him. Like,
yeah, I just didn't know. Like, I was kind of like, I figured at this point before I woke up, or I would assume it would. I thought Charles.
Usually, if it's not the race leader or winner or getting driver of the day, it's usually somebody who had like a noteworthy moment or like a particularly good performance or made a couple of good passes. I
could have seen maybe Lando because of the brake thing at the end and having to manage that, or, you know, Oscar because he won. That's my driver of the day is Oscar. I think that he just earned it. He just killed it. He did his best. He proved this whole weekend was his weekend. He was really like kind of always at the top. And I just think that, you know, after that horrible weekend he had last weekend, this was like redemption. And so
I'm giving my driver of the day to Alex Albon.
That's a fact. Yeah, that's true.
Because someone, again, made the observation that it seems like, and we kind of thought this might happen, that bringing Sainz on board as the second Williams driver was going to give Albon the push that he needed to up his game and take it to the next level. And I'm very impressed with him so far this season and what he's been able to do and kind of his... I mean, just overall how he's done. Even toward the beginning of the race, they were trying to tell him what to do. His engineer was on the radio trying to tell him either what to do or giving him some sort of information. Yeah. And Alex, with so much confidence and sass, got on that radio. He interrupted his engineer and said, yeah, I know. we're better than everybody else.
Yeah, there was the tires, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, we're better than everybody else. I'm fine. Let me do this. I got it.
We had a lot of sassiness. Because even at one point during, was it qualifying? Or maybe, I don't know where this was. I can't quite remember. They're like, Yuki, don't use so much of the front. He goes, I want to. And they're like, okay. Or whatever. Like, they're just like.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. That was during the race. They said, don't do this. He said, I want to, and they said, okay.
Yeah, basically like, well, I guess do whatever you want then. Yeah, no, Alex makes sense.
Yeah, Alex is, again, he's another one of those drivers that is quietly sneaking up there into my favorites, where I'm just like, if he does well, I'm happy.
So, biggest letdown. I feel like it's pretty obvious. Just Ferrari. Yeah. That I just don't even have words. I feel like it speaks for itself. Both having two drivers be disqualified. You're now behind Williams in the constructors. It's just really unfortunate for both drivers because through no fault of their own that happened. And after Charles managed that race with that wing, which granted I think ended up really just aiding him in his race. I mean, but still, Lewis had a really good weekend up until like the main race really. Charles, he ended up kind of finding his footing in the main race. And it just is like unfortunate for, two drivers who are like kind of making it work and doing their best. And then you just have like Ferrari messed up and they didn't calculate whatever they needed to calculate. And because of that, now everybody suffers for it. So that's my letdown.
My biggest letdown before I knew about the Ferrari news, my biggest letdown was RB because we had Isaac Hadjar and Yuki Tsunoda qualifying again, like qualifying well. They qualified 7th and 9th this time. And then to finish outside of the points. It just really is, it's unfortunate. It comes back to just like the strategy not being right. Something's going on that it just really, really sucks. And this is my second week in a row that they're my biggest disappointment. And I'm like, come on, give me Yuki Tsunoda in the points, please.
No, literally, I can't. I cannot. Well, that pretty much sums up China. There's also things, there's probably 400 other little stories you could talk about, but those were the ones that stood out to us. So now the next race we're going to go to in 2 weeks. So this coming weekend will be a free weekend. It's going to be Suzuka Circuit in Japan.
Ooh, Suzuka.
So,
I love the name. It's fun to say.
So last year's main race results, it was Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, and Carlos Sainz. Last year in Japan, I mean, Max finished first, well ahead of everybody else. That was when really the Red Bull was still like performing really well. So something to consider for Japan. We obviously don't know what the weather's going to be like. It does rain a lot there, but I tried to do some research to figure out like, okay, have they done anything to this track? They have. So first thing to know, it's a high-speed track. There's one DRS zone, and a lot of drivers love Japan. But that being said, they have... So I got two conflicting reports, and I don't know if it's just because of like language barrier stuff or what it is. I read one thing that they've resurfaced the entire track, which it had been a long time since that had happened. I read another thing that went into more detail about how they really just resurfaced and re-asphalted the first sector of the track. And that's to help improve because when it rains in Japan, like you have standing water. So that's supposed to help with water drainage, reduce the risk of standing water if it does rain, because it rains a lot there. So by resurfacing the first sector, it's trying to help them enhance the tire grip, helping the cars handle load shifts more effectively in the high speed and technical first sector. They've also resurfaced the final sector. So I guess that's a very technical sector as well. So they're trying to again, there's two reports that I read that the whole thing was done. Then I read that certain parts were done. I don't know if resurfacing and re-asphalting are two different things. I'm sure we'll find out.
I think it's the same.
Yeah. So I'm sure we'll find out in the warm-up whenever it's time. But I know something has been done to this track. They've added new curbstones with a revised design and replaced grass runoff areas with gravel at certain corners. So they're trying to make drivers not test the track limits. So it's going to be a different experience. So if you are kind of used to being able to ride that white line or do this and that, you're not going to be able to because you're going to hit a gravel trap.
Which the drivers have been wanting that anyway. They've been saying they want more, instead of imposing time penalties and stuff for track limits. They're like, just put in more gravel traps because that effectively penalizes you for making a mistake and going off track.
Yeah. So it should be interesting, you know, with it being resurfaced and it's already a high-speed track, we're going to see like some things be performances enhanced. And I mean, granted, we don't know what the weather is going to be like. Japan, I guess it's always kind of up in the air because it does rain a lot there. So we'll just have to see what it's going to be like. So yeah, that's pretty much what's going on in Japan. Resurface some parts of it and they've added gravel. So
fun.
It's the same track, but different.
Yeah.
So, and apparently they also have plans to develop the track more because they're now going to be on the calendar until 2029 for sure. So I think they're slowly upgrading things because this was all done in the winter. So yeah, we'll see how Japan goes. That'll be interesting because the cars are so close now that it's just like, ooh, could be anybody's again.
Yes. Okay. Well, with that, we will end it here and we will talk at you in 2 weeks with our next F1 review / analysis thingy.
Yes. All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.